record show that it is Wednesday, December 13th at 3:01 p.m. And we're going to open our Finance Committee meeting. And at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Davis and Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Loeffler. Today there are three items under business. One is approval of the 2018-2019 fiscal year budget. Another is approval of support for outside agencies. And the third is approval of travel expenses. Going right into the first, the approval of the 2018-2019 fiscal year budget. Budget that has been prepared by staff includes on a consolidated basis $8.5 million of income, $6.5 million expense, round numbers, leaving $2 million in change to fund everything else that we do, including debt service and capital projects. We're currently forecasting net income of basically $250,000 across the units, and at this point I think it would be appropriate to both thank and turn it over to Jim Smith for all the hard work and effort that you've done putting this together this year. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that too, Wade. I mean, to Mr. Smith, coming in here, the short notice of, I really understand the finances, whatever. I appreciate you really taking extra time and effort to analyze this process and where we need to go, and I appreciate that effort.
Thank you. I'm getting there.
I know you are. So, take us where you want to go.
Okay.
Yes.
First of all, due to a what I guess I would call a CFO learning curve issue, we counted close to $700,000 of expense in the port for the temporary longshoremen 2 times in the budget. So the one that I sent out last night showed a $300,000 negative number, and the one we're showing you today is a $300,000 positive number. And that's just the result of the port folks issuing a net of expense project for the windmill turbines, and me picking up the expense and not knowing the expense was in the other line. So
I love the surprise.
picked up $700,000 twice. In essence.
The question is now, obviously you double checked again, and you know, whatever.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the main impetus for the change between last night's version that you received at home
Okay.
via email and today's version.
How would you pick that up?
I wouldn't have, but we sat with the staff department managers today, and Adam pointed that out from
Excellent.
the port. So he does everything on a net basis and puts one number in there. And
Okay.
I had thought that the longshoremen that we had to hire.
I remember he questioned the number, and I'm glad you guys got together and,
So
yeah.
we're a lot closer. I would say the
Okay.
port is probably my least familiar revenue stream
Okay.
for the port for myself. So, like I said, making gains, but still
Okay.
in the middle of the learning curve. Yeah, so,
Before you move on, I just look at, I'm assuming this is a new one.
yes, that's a new
So the
one.
number is more than just revenue for the port has increased, is that correct?
Yes,
I mean, slightly, a little bit in the industrial park and Brown. Looks like it was changed from 939 up to 1,011,000. Airport went up a little. The bridge stayed the same, correct?
yes. For all intents and purposes, yes. The change in the industrial park, it's a smaller number, but it was, we had not included the CPI increase in the rental rates. So once that was added, that added $40,000 or $50,000 to the total for the year.
And this is a slight change in total expenses from 6.454 to 6.459. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And those are small increases or decreases based on our conversations this morning.
Okay, good.
So the revenue division income, total income for the airport, that's the million that we're getting for reaching our 10,000.
No, I'm sorry, that is, the actual number was 996,000 that was in there, but I actually had them rounded up to $1 million, because this will be the first time ever that the airport will clear $1 million on the revenue line. This $1 million is not to be confused with the $1 million that we get under the ACIP funding that we talked about yesterday. And that is on the capital side of the house. This is strictly the revenue coming into the airport is going to be $1 million.
And we're estimating $1 million for the year of revenue coming in.
Yes.
Do you feel comfortable with that line item?
Yes, I'm close. You know, we're finding out in the last day or two that the Tampa flights are not as filled as we have projected in the budget. So the Orlando flights, I think, have been a little higher here in the wintertime. But short of that, there's increases in parking revenue as a result of the increase in the number of flights and the number of enplanements. There's increases in the PFC charges, obviously. There's increases in the BOLO part of the equation. And as you get into the individual revenue sheets,
I have questions when we get there.
This is based on also Cape Air's current load factor. It's based on an Allegiant assumption consistent with prior years that I don't want to mention on camera. But you'll see that data as we go through.
And Volo in there too, right?
Yes,
And
Volvo's.
fueling.
My other question, on the port, are we planning on does this figure come from Adam?
Yes,
yes.
and you'll see it specifically
And the
detailed.
the biggest jump in there is the addition of a wind turbine project that's committed to. John, am I safe saying that?
Well, they're working on it. Yeah, they're doing pricing right now, so I mean, it's not a signed contract, but that's his projection.
Playing devil's advocate here, folks, is if we don't reach that $1 million revenue and that $3 million at the port, and that estimation, we're going to be behind the 8 ball again.
Even further, if the airport does not meet its revenue and expense targets, I mean, this budget is still subsidizing the airport to the tune, round numbers, of $700,000. And that's $700,000 that we don't have. So, I mean, it is what it is in that regard, but take a look at the assumptions when we get to the airport side of things, and also on the port side of things. Again, we questioned Adam this morning. Are these reliable? Are they what you believe to actually happen in the upcoming year? And the answer was yes. So there's not, we want to say there's not unbridled optimism in any of these numbers that you're looking at here.
Where does the,
However, targets that need to be met.
Yes.
Because if we can't meet the targets, we got to reduce expenses.
I haven't looked down, do you have a parking revenue line? I'm comparing last year's line to, do we have a,
Yeah, was it? Yeah, that was in there.
So,
The
Jeff,
revenue.
If you go into the airport,
Why don't we start talking about the airport and just go right through the assumptions of the airport? Seems to be generating a lot of questions.
What page is that?
okay, the airport revenues are going to be located on page 3. You can see the listing of all of the different revenue stream items that are included there. We do have a SOAR grant, which is not a capital grant, that goes up in this revenue line, $65,000. Some of the details of that SOAR grant are not yet known, but we have been approved. So,
Details as in restrictions?
Yes, we don't know the
Restrictions
details
or-
of it yet.
what we can or can't spend it on, et cetera, et cetera.
We're awaiting notification from Senator Ritchie's office. We put in 2 requests on that.
So the Volo revenue line, that will not go up, will it go down?
It's projected to go up slightly because of the increased number of flights. Full year service of Tampa, St. Pete, hopeful.
So based on the existing schedule Allegiant has for us right now, it looks like there's going to be 150 flights a year coming into the airport.
Just estimate, quick, what was the estimated revenue from Volo last year that we have in our budget?
I don't see it in my line. I couldn't find it.
I don't know that they segregated it out.
I was just
It
gonna
was-
say,
It was buried in there.
it was
last year, I
buried
believe.
someplace, but
Yeah,
it's not like,
I don't have it on my
This is-
sheet here.
this is much easier to look at, but
Volo subcontracted is a little bit, it's, they give me their financial statement every month, so they have all their expenditures, all their fuel sales and rentals
Do
that
you see a breakdown?
go through their corporate.
I don't. I see it looks like it was pieced out.
Well, you know what, Doug, I
Okay,
mean,
no,
everybody here, this is what should be looking at in the past also. So, I mean, to me, Jim, you really put us up to date, because we didn't, I don't have anything, Doug, that matches this from last year.
oh no, because
Nothing,
this is a whole
nothing.
new, this is, to me, is a
Yeah.
lot better system than we had
Absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
past, so.
Yeah,
Well, in answer to one of your questions, I guess you didn't ask that question yet, but airport parking revenue last year was forecast at 460. This year it's 223 based
Yeah.
on actual flights.
well, here's, last year, the FBO, you looked at $120,000 of revenue
Yep.
from Volo last year.
I just
No.
want to make sure this is a realistic number to, because I can see us in 6 months, 7 months saying, oh my God, we didn't meet our target, we didn't, we're $150,000 short, and then all heck breaks loose.
What I tried to do with this year's budget is I took 7 months of their actual data, extended it, and then incrementally increased it based on the number of flights that were increasing.
Okay.
So,
And then we took the numbers down based on actual folks that park in the lot out there.
Yep.
We took it down based on Cape Air's load factor and also using the Allegiant assumption as well.
You know, it's quite interesting. I'm glad we're having this discussion, because when you compare last year and this year, and call it a guess from last year, I look at the revenue numbers of 460, 225, field rate operation is 120, didn't come up, all the numbers were, I don't know, hypothetical is the word I want to use. Hypothetical, whatever. And so now we have some sort of, I would say, a baseline of what really we have. And I'd like to think when we sit here a year from now that we'll take these numbers and say, okay, this is what we did and what we didn't do. So the forecasting of what you have is a little bit more realistic. Last year's budget does not
you also
line
have
up.
the advantage of having a little more time, so you have some baseline underneath you.
Oh, absolutely.
Have some actual expenses.
I mean, I look at these numbers here, they're not even close.
That you didn't have last year.
They're all over the place.
So, for example, by category, the airport last year had $1,574,000 in revenue, which was forecast, and had expenses of basically $2.1 million was what was in the last year's budget. Now compare that to $1 million in this upcoming year's budget on the revenue line, and on the expense line, 2.2. or I'm sorry, that's the bridge. 1.68 million. Yeah, so I think we've got much more accurate numbers based
Yeah,
on
I think
actual
so.
performance this year.
Well,
Does that help answer your question,
So
Joe?
any questions on the budgeted revenues for the airport?
Yeah, I do. The MAPCO, budgeting 223. How do we increase that? In the sense that, I know what you've done to get there, but as far as John Morrison isn't here, I've asked him, how do we increase that in terms of getting more people to use the parking than what we have now?
Well, it all comes down to number of people that come in the lot. And one of the things that we've noticed is all flights are not created equal. The Pi flight does not have the same number of parkers, if you will, that the Orlando flight has. A weekday versus a weekend makes a difference in the percentage of people that park in our lot. So for example, you can, on a weekday flight, you can usually set your watch by the fact that about 55% of the people that come through to get on the plane will park their car. And that's on a typical Wednesday, Thursday. If it's a Saturday, Sunday flight, that ratio is a lot lower. So that's kind of problematic. So when you do some hypothetical math here and you look at it and you say, okay, well, the folks that we know who's parking in the parking lot, because we can see that from the MAPCO side of things. We know who's on the plane, and when we match that up, we say, okay, well, 45% didn't park in the parking lot, and there's generally 2.5 people, or 2.8 people per car is the ratio. So therefore, we know that 90% of them are going through the toll booth, come to Canada. So we know that if they would have parked in the parking lot, there'd be an extra 200, round numbers now, $250,000. But because they're going through the toll booth 4 times as opposed to twice, that means we're picking up an extra $50,000 on the toll booth side of things. So that's a long-winded explanation as to when those flights are matter, and also who's on them matters. One distinct thing that we've noticed on the Pi flight versus the Orlando flight is the number of children. There's almost no children on the Pi flights. Now, that's neither here nor there. That's just, walking around observation kind of thing. The key to this airport, however, is more flights. Because more flights equal more people in the lot, equals more revenues, equal more toll booth revenue. And we have a tremendous amount of fixed cost at the airport just because we have to have that cost to be an airport. So the more flights we get in here, the better off we are.
So our expenses with MAPCO is pretty much consistent in 2018 as it was this year.
Yes. Should be.
So our expenses aren't growing, and our contract with them goes for how much longer? 8 years?
This is a 10-year contract with MAPCO, signed, 2 years ago, basically, so.
It's quite interesting. You think of, we have 2 airports that are going to Sanford and St. Pete. And all of a sudden, if you added one destination on top of that, you just accelerated your whole process by a lot. So in other words, 2 more flights a week is a tremendous asset as far as the continuum for parking and the surcharges and all the type of things that go with having that extra flight. So, that's our goal. We just have to prove this process, prove that it's fundamentally that Allegiance says, yeah, this is the right thing to do. And, and probably Lauderdale will come back. But because there's a lot of complications to their system. And their system is they're growing at such a fast pace that they're aging aircraft okay, and the replacement is not keeping pace. And so they're accelerating. I think if I remember correctly, the graph was in 2018 is their catch-up, or is it 2019? That they put all the A320s in, the MD-80s are gone, they're fuel hogs. I mean, and MD-80s can't land here. I mean, that's just another element of their system because of the number of planes they have. And so the MD-80s have to go to Lauderdale, it has a longer runway, it has different capabilities of the aircraft. It doesn't suit this airport. And so once they upgrade all the new aircraft that they have, now we became more viable to them to add another site too, whatever. But we have to have the numbers. But that's the growth of what they're dealing with and where we'll fit into their plans. And so
I'll just add to that, there's some places that their aircraft right now that serve Ogdensburg can't go. So for example, we've often talked with them about one of the most requested destinations, which is Myrtle Beach. Well, Myrtle Beach is an Allegiant MD-80 station. So an Airbus flies in there, they can't handle it. Now that station, as you're mentioning, there is part of their changeover as they continue to phase out all their MD-80 aircraft.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's going to change things. But at the end of the day, airports need aircraft and flights. And we have 4 very good flights right now, but we need more. That's the gist of the whole thing.
the seat configuration is different than MD-80. They have 1 seat on the aisle and 2 seats on the other side. And so we have a much more comfortable aircraft versus the MD-80. But I mean, it's a lot of air service providers use that as a regional jet. But you know, that's just and that's just because of the load factor numbers that go on that particular plane. So
Just one more quick question. The PFC charges, is that, what do we base our numbers on?
That is based on, it's funny you mentioned that, I was just doing the calculation here. That's 28,810 enplanements.
Okay.
And we're on track this year for 23, 24,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay.
what can you use those monies for, Wade?
The PFCs?
Yeah.
The PFCs, by just their nature, we have to use them for airport-specific things. And that's our opportunity to pay ourselves back for the, you know how the FAA projects are funded 95%, 2.5% on us? The 2.5% on us, that's our ability to.
So that, well, I guess so for accounting practices, that money stays in a separate account?
It does,
Okay. so
highly
it's-
restricted.
Okay, so we're not playing with that money into a budget, that's, what do you say, allocated to be there and to use for certain specific things?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know.
Very limited.
Okay.
The FBO revenue, what does that consist of?
The largest piece of that is fuel sales. There's also rentals that go through the Volo account.
Rentals such as?
Rentals, hangar rentals, facility fee rentals.
The fuel charge to Allegiant is buried in there as well.
It's mostly fuel?
It is predominantly fuel, yes.
Now, that's quite an increase over last year.
Yeah, if you only had 120,000 last year.
Yeah. Okay.
And Cape Air purchases fuel with us too?
You've got quite a bit more. This year, you've got 10 months worth of 2017 actual data.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And that's how that number is spread out. Now, in the budget, they put 120,000, but Volo had just started in October
Yeah.
with the runway extension and opening the airport. So they didn't have a lot to go with last year. Now we've got 10 years of the baseline data. And I incrementally increased it via the increase in the Allegiant flights. So
Pilots love that full service offering that's there by Volo as well too. That translates into more revenue.
Right, well, we had talked earlier.
what I should do, in all likelihood, is I should have MAPCO and Volo on their own sheet. that all gets assigned to the airport, so you can see more of the detail of what makes up those numbers.
Yeah.
Because they're big numbers and they kind of stick out on the revenue side plus on the expense side.
We had talked earlier, Doug at a airport committee meeting about other flights coming in and fueling, how that's increased in the past year. How do we reach out to that, or is that just because we happen to be here and it's different than it used to be? That's increased, you know?
Well, there's been a couple of things. Our agent Volo has reached out on our behalf promoting the services at the airport. It's the difference between having a standalone self-service gas pump out in the middle of a field and having a full-service gas station. And that's what we have now. Plus, with our pricing arrangements, it's pretty favorable pricing, and all that is causing a lot of unexpected growth on the charter side of the
Right.
charter side of the house. So
So
it's,
Volo's reached out to individuals and companies they know and have helped us out in
Yes.
that aspect. Good. Thank you.
So any other questions on the airport revenues?
We may come back to that.
Okay. Okay. Hoping you could all follow the methodology. I gave you the income statement, which is a summary of everything. And then I gave you all of the revenue worksheets individually. And then, once you got into the expense side, you got into categories of expense. It flows easier, from my perspective, from our general ledger to our worksheets. Difficult because of the condensed time frame to get everything in there with enough detail, so people can see the detail.
Where would I find prior year's budget or prior year's expenditures actual?
On this report, you won't, but I can get you copies of the prior year budget.
I think we've got that electronically as well. Last year's packet that went out to the board, it went out to the finance committee first, and then the finance committee tuned it up, and then it went to the board. I don't have the electronic format of what went to the board, but I do have what originally went to the finance committee. That's all right there, so it's 98% correct, I guess. It'll help kind of ground you.
Would you like a copy of last year's?
That would be
Maybe
super.
we can put that in loan or whatever. Okay.
Or a link to it if it's available electronically.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally right here. I mean, we can make a copy of it. It's
Okay,
just,
great.
50 pages.
So where are we at now, Jim? What page at?
I'm on essentially any page you want to go to. We had a lot of questions about the port revenues, so let's take a quick look at that.
Which page?
Page 5. Now, I'll apologize in advance, but these are Adam's summary totals and my in-depth knowledge of where they come from. I'm getting more comfortable with the salt ships that come in and the piles that we have down there. Pretty consistent. Fertilizer is showing some growth. And the windmill project is a summary of the net proceeds from that windmill project. So what I have done, remember I spoke about the temporary longshoremen that we hired to store and unload the windmill blades. That line item down below is $699,725, which is what we budgeted for salaries and employer FICA. So $650,000 in salary and $49,000 for employer FICA expense.
Let me go back to Doug's point, and I think is, to me, hypothetical and reality are mixed in here. And the hypothetical is, if everything proceeds the way Adam says it is, these are realistic numbers.
Mhm.
It's fair to say?
Yes.
If there is a failure in these numbers along the way, of what something may happen, that will domino affect everything else in our system. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, those numbers don't line up with, and now it's going to impact everything along the
What
way.
actually happens.
Okay, so that's the danger that we have here, correct?
Yeah, so I think the add-ons from Adam's perspective, and I'm not sure I want to speak in his stead, but fertilizer, they're projecting some growth
Good.
in the fertilizer traffic or the number of ships that come in. And the new parts are the windmills. There's 3 line items that make up the windmills. And then there's a line item for grain. It says $120,000. So we've got those new grain bins and projecting them to go online July 1st.
Okay, let me add another thought into this, because one thought is this a high number that he's saying that we could get? Steve's shaking his head down there. And I heard the rattle, but I just wanted, for the viewing public, I love you, buddy, is the idea is, okay, there's movement on this number up.
Yes.
Yes, okay, and that's why I appreciate you shaking your head, Steve, that, you know, that we're all aware of, these are lowball numbers, and I'd like to say they're conservative.
Well, when I was going through with that, you know,
Say it again?
when we were going through that together, I was cautioning him on that, and I said, stay relatively conservative, and things that, you know, will likely happen. So, you know, I'm pretty good with those, with everything that he's got there. And there's other things that, if we didn't have the confidence that it wasn't in there, there's other things out there, but not with the confidence to be able to say you could budget towards it.
And they're aware that they will be held to these numbers.
Well,
Okay.
These are their numbers.
You know, I go back to my budget preparing days, and one thing was, okay, put an extra 10% in your expenses.
Right.
Maybe your expenses are gonna go up 10, and then on the revenue side, you go down 10. Okay, and so you say, all right, where am I gonna fit in between there? And it gives you a cushion. It gives you a cushion. If you're straight lined, okay, it won't play out that way. So there's gotta be some leadway either way. That's, I wonder what his thought process is. It sounds to me he's on the low end.
Yeah, and if you take like the windmill project, if it didn't happen, neither would the longshoremen. You see the longshoremen down there for the 690, you know, certain things
Sure.
are all part of that thing, and if they don't happen, there's it's just a wash. I mean, it's you don't get the revenue that you were expecting
Sure.
with that.
Well, I really,
So the windmill project is approximately half the port's revenue.
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so, yeah.
Absolutely.
So that doesn't go.
If that doesn't happen, then
What's the
the
net?
expenses are gonna crash down.
What's the net
But
on that windmill?
I would advise not answering that on camera
Yeah.
and addressing that, because we're not the only port that watches this tape. But you could easily, to answer your question,
Yeah,
you could easily take those windmill lines and look at that, the bottom miscellaneous line, and
I just don't have my calculator.
Yep.
right now. Next time I'll bring it.
Well, it's an interesting point. What did the $300,000 clerical misthought you had in your process, what did that do to your whole process? Did you change anything along the way thinking that, whoa, wait a minute, instead of,
no, if we
You
hadn't
know,
had the
so-
conversation this morning, I wouldn't have realized it. And we would have been talking about an
Okay.
under budget with a negative cash flow.
and so now all
Where
of a
we had
sudden
come up
we,
with it.
what would you tell me then, what that meant to you, that $300,000 difference? As far as you're grinding it out, whatever, to find every nickel versus, I mean, $300,000 is a lot of money. a lot of money. I mean, you gotta do, that makes a game player for a lot of different things. And so does that flavor optimism? Does it flavor, I mean, I'm still cautious here what we're doing here. I mean, there's no question about that part. But I also think about, you know, the reality of, because there are other things that affect people's lives here, whatever, that, you know, people don't realize what budgets do. And so I want to make sure that what we decide and what we do is what it should be. True? Yeah.
Well, like I said, I'm comfortable with the revenues.
Okay.
I'm very reliant on Adam producing them. I'm comfortable
Okay.
with the expenses.
Well,
Well, as I look at the revenue budgets, on all of our areas right now, if they come to fruition, okay, we're gonna be in really good shape. But if they don't,
I don't know if I'd say really good
Well,
shape, but
you know, we'll
we'll
be
better than we are today.
better than we are.
Correct.
That's really good.
But if we don't, all right, we're into some trouble again. And, you know, it was great that we found the 300,000, but I'd like to find another 300,000. And,
you know, Doug, one of the things I think about is what your potential is and what your abilities to reach that potential. With the airport and with the port, you have potential to do better than what you have. I mean, I guess that's my optimism side. And if you don't reach that side, then all of a sudden you say, why did I fail? And that failure is not acceptable here. And that's our problem.
Well,
We have no room for any failure.
You have no cushion.
There's no cushion.
I guess the old saying that if it doesn't come to reality, then some heads are gonna be rolled,
Well,
Yes.
No, we,
you know?
basically,
Well, you gotta
we
look at.
didn't have a
you
good
gotta-
year at the port this year
No.
that we had anticipated.
Yep.
At least I anticipated
I
more
did too.
activity at the port, and it didn't happen.
Exactly. And we've talked about that.
Yeah,
We'll see.
we have.
And the implications of what it's done to us this year.
Right, so yeah, I agree with Doug. You know, you get a little on edge thinking, could it happen again? And if it does, the consequences, I don't even want to think about. But, you know, I mean, John, 120,000 for grain. What do you think?
I assume that's based on the actual contracts that we already have, with no increase.
I don't want to make assumptions
That's a
here.
new
Would you
service.
text Adam and get him up here, please? If
He's
we
gone home.
need to go into executive session because these are his numbers.
No, that 120 is based on our history, just what we've had the last couple of years. We take an average of that
okay.
and just average it out and don't make any wild, you know, looking at some of the, you know, some suppliers have slowed down and others, and then we just kind of average that, and that isn't like an exceptional number, exceptionally high or anything. I would say that's just right in line with what we've done, and that's been pretty steady. So that's when you can feel fairly confident in, because you haven't really seen any real ups and downs on that. Most of it's been by rail and then out by truck.
You know, it's interesting because the grain bins have had a different dimension of what we do down there, but we missed the growing season, or the harvest season, I should say. And so now we have to start all over again and to get ourselves into the system again. So I guess really what we're saying is, in this budget, they don't really exist because that's the same numbers that you've always had, correct?
Yeah, you're
And
saying.
now, but
the
I
grain
guess
bins,
what
we
my
get-
thought is, on the added part is, your potential there is, because now you have grain bin capacity for more product or different type of products, a more effective way of dispersing the grains in the product, which is a cost savings and a growth potential. And that combined is, that 120 is probably a low ball number.
Yeah, and what I think what we're trying to do with the grain bins is not so much, you know, as long as they're full, but the idea would be, you don't want 8 rail cars sitting there. You want eight coming in every 2 weeks maybe, and
Right.
just
Right.
constant throughput to where you bump up that 120, you're talking on top of
Oh, absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I have level of optimism because the infrastructure and things that we have has growth potential. I mean, I really believe OMLC has the potential to blow some numbers off the chart here, okay, as we grow. I mean, it was dismal last year, but I still believe there's potential there. I see the airport has potential to grow, and I see the grain bin as another added dimension for growth, whatever. I mean, that's, so obviously, what we do is regarded to how our marketing approaches and everything is gonna move us forward.
And John's had a couple, I mean, he had a little interest with different, with people that we don't have now that have at least looked at them.
Yeah, we've talked about moving existing customers that have new commodities and making use of them. That's the primary focus right now.
Do we have a dryer built into this budget?
No,
No.
No, there's no trying.
No. Oh, how much was the dryer?
I couldn't tell you.
it's expensive.
Yeah, it was quite a bit.
Another 300,000?
I want to say that, yeah.
Okay.
Climate control and fans and all of that, yeah.
But that makes a big difference. I remember when we talked about the dryer, right, John? Makes a
Yeah.
whole big difference with what we can offer. Where can we get 300,000? You got 300,000?
Well, you know what, but that's the analytical thoughts from John and OMLC, and people were out there, and you say, okay, if I had the dryer, okay, that should be a capital expense that you say, okay, that's a revenue generator that can do things that we haven't done in the past. I mean, so we got grain bins, okay, that disperse and of effective use, but what product can I put in there that limits me again? So I'm back to the flat storage as much, you see, and so that's a flaw. I don't say it's a flaw, but that's something we have to work at to make the grain bins more effective.
Well, we've worked with Vermont Rail, and now they have a spur going in, and they can do things with cars that before we couldn't do.
Yeah, you can, right now, we can load directly from the rail hopper through the system, and then you'll see that the tall tower at the end of Building 8, well, there's a chute into there now. So there's no putting it in a dump truck, taking it, dumping it, and all that. You basically unload the rail car.
We can do that now?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
awesome, really.
once everything's in, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's the thing, you'd go up, and then you could relocate whatever product you have, and it's right there, and it's all covered. It's not going from way out there at the truck, and then you go in and you dump it and all that. You're basically one person right in there, and it's just a matter of sorting it out when it's in the building 8, which that's more efficiency type of thing that reduces cost.
That's a nice improvement over what we've been able to do.
Oh.
Right.
yeah.
But
Lot
that
lot more
dryer,
flexibility.
thanks, John.
Well, you know, in that port budget, the storage things, the buildings that are empty down there, what is the program to improve that?
You mean like Building 5?
Building 5's been empty since Hackle left. I mean, was there anything out there, John, that you know of that potential, or is it we just kind of locked in for whatever?
We're working on a couple of things with Building 5.
Yeah.
Long shot with the turbine manufacturer. It's one of the options there.
Okay.
Nothing really serious, though, I don't think, at this point. So, Steve, I mean, you've got
Just,
newer
at times
information.
we've talked about, like plywood and lumber type of, being like a kind of a
Yeah.
distribution center, either by rail or by truck, bringing it in, and that's a great space for that, but just trying to get all of that together and maybe be in a distribution for either southern Canada or the Northeast.
Okay, and now you're on to my next question. Because one of the things that we talked about is obviously the permitting process for B-train trucking to go over the bridge and into the port. Where would that process do to this budget, or what would the forecast for that?
Well, that would be additional upside there, but keep in mind that's not gonna happen anytime soon, because we need legislative relief there, which even best case, You would have, it would be June before the Senate approved it, and then probably August, September before the governor signed it into law. So you've missed the majority of the season before you start.
So we're 8 months away. Okay, I mean, that's the harvest season, that's type of things that are going on, the products are storage. Okay, I mean, that's the potential that you try to engulf in what's going on here, that
Yeah, I
it
would say
makes sense
if we
to,
could work out the bridge weights, that would be a multiplier on what we have now. I would
okay.
say that, right? Wouldn't
Yeah,
that be
it
fair
would
to
be
say?
a big driver.
Yeah,
It would be, but.
we talked about that in many.
Yeah, yeah.
But none of that's in here because you can't
Yeah.
count on it.
Right.
Okay,
Too-
and
too many
that's
ifs,
what,
ands, or
but
buts.
that's what I'm
Well,
trying
yeah,
to
we're working
digest,
toward it.
okay? When you look at the weakness of what your revenues can be, then you ask the question, there is potential for them to be something else, just because there's other possibilities
Right.
out there. And I know Mr. Burns is working really hard on through this port committee to make some things happen, so I think that's important to note too, so go from there.
Yeah, like the zinc's a new product,
Mm.
and, I don't know, maybe the 160,000 is low, hopefully, but we should know right off in January, right?
Right.
Really? Awesome. There you go. Anything else on the port?
Okay, if everyone's ready to move towards the midsection of the report,
Can we go, we do the bridge? I'm sorry.
which are the expenses.
Well, did we do the bridge revenue that I missed?
Are you,
Yeah, why don't we just continue to walk through it by asset?
Yeah,
okay, all right.
let's work it on
We
that.
got the port done, we got the airport done. Let's go ahead and talk about the bridge.
I got it. Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna excuse myself.
Okay, go ahead.
So the major assumptions for the bridge revenues are basically flat for autos, with the methodology being a small decrease in the year-to-year volumes of cars coming across, supplemented and flattened out by the increase in the Tampa flight cars coming over. So we budgeted the car side to be relatively flat. Commercial, all other, the trucks, we've estimated a 3% incline. With most of the other categories being relatively flat. The building rental income is this building, people that are upstairs. So most of those increases are picked up, and flat rentals are picked up, and even the newest tenants are picked up in this budget. So I think that number's in pretty good shape. We are not currently aware of any, approved grant contracts that are coming our way.
Are they ready to be requested?
We've got a Tiger grant outstanding, an application
And a fast lane
that would have
as well.
earmarked for the bridge. What'd you say, is that fast lane? Fast lane grant?
Infra is its new name, it's fast lane, DOT fast lane. Obviously, we're hopeful, we have some really good applications there, but on the Tiger side of things, realistically, we've done 7 of them. We tune them up each time, we have wonderful support on each side of the aisle, and we continue to make the case for their approval. But,
Competition's so tough out there for these things. It really is. I think if I was the airport guy talking to the bridge guy, I'd say, listen, you owe me some money because you're putting your money from your bridge pocket because I got an airport and you're taking my money. But I mean, that's really what's happened here. Am I correct in saying?
I think you're transferring money from the bridge to the airport now, right?
Yeah.
Ron's getting his money.
All those
He's getting more than
years,
he-
all those
he
years the
deserves,
other way.
man.
It worked the other way, didn't it?
Spending more.
Oh, gee.
when we're looking back at this tape a year from now, or this video, I should say, this is predicated on a cent Canadian exchange rate.
Mhm. Who knows if it's gonna go up or down, eh?
Oh, yeah, that's one of those crystal ball items that
You know, one thing we kind of
hard
jumped
to
over,
project.
in the port was the expansion project for the dock, whatever.
That comes later on your expense.
Yeah, that'd be
That's on your capital side?
capital side of things.
Okay, then you're gonna bring it in there, okay. All right, I can wait for that.
The OBSI, John, are we pretty much getting close to settling that contract with them? No?
No, I think their response to our request is, they said they'd be back to us by February 6th. We don't know what their response is going to be. I don't think they're gonna offer like more revenue or anything. So then it's, we have to react to that when we get it. And it should position us for once the main contract expires in August. So it should position us in terms of negotiating that contract. So I don't think we budgeted for any increase.
That's what this is?
So we have a small increase effective October 1, but that's when we negotiate the next lease, so
That's a federal fiscal year.
yes, we will need to provide the justification for any requests that we have ongoing.
But it's relatively small. That's in
Yeah,
here.
the
That's
biggest-
reflecting as 352,000.
Yes.
Okay.
The biggest change going on as we speak is we make our final bond payment in early 2018, and I'm not sure exactly which month, but it's not reflected in this budget because it happens before April. That is what happens with the big drop in the accrued revenues from the grant, because that's, for lack of a better term, it's kind of a pass-through in the current lease. So,
I mean, not really,
cash flow perspective. we're
because
gonna
that
be-
increased revenue pretty much paid for our cost of the building, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to think of it.
Thanks.
So any other questions on the bridge? The OBSI management fee is a little bit larger number, but that's gonna stay fixed until Wade and I come up with a different accounting methodology, because that's some of the things that we're in the process of looking at and changing. It doesn't mean anything's gonna change in total, but it may change a little bit what bucket it ends up in.
So that advertising income is just based on what we have right on here?
Yep. I believe so.
16,000 a year isn't bad at all. I don't think.
You know, I think advertising income comes from the electronic board,
Right,
and then it also comes from a few billboards we've got around. So
that's pretty good.
John would have to help me if there's more in there than those couple of line items, but
Maintenance expenses. Is that in bridge inspection in that number?
Nope.
That's on the other
Yeah, and
capital
that's-
side, huh?
Yeah, that's not just strictly the bridge, there's other parts, like fuel for the, everything around here would be in there, maintenance, equipment maintenance and
Okay.
things like that. The bridge is a little bigger than just the bridge, is what that would be encompassing. But in the capital, I don't know, did you include that, the, like maintenance crews number in that? Is that all part of it in maintenance expense? Yes, I would think so. right?
probably need to get, yes, I believe
Yeah.
it is, but
Okay. So-
it won't show up on the bridge revenue report, so,
Right.
because it's an expense
Better not.
and capital, so.
Jim, help me get from old terminology, new terminology. Where's the duty free in here? I'm on
Under the
page
building
2.
rental income,
Building rental income?
That's also office space here.
Office space here, yeah. I think there's a listing of, I want to say, 8 to 10 different tenants pay us, that goes into that building rental income. So any other questions on the bridge revenue page?
Well, I see one line from the revenue, and I see all these other lines of expenses, but I guess, I'm not sure where I'm gonna ask the question. Maybe I'll ask it now to you, Steve, as far as the budget that you have here. Are we missing something here? No, I mean.
No, it covers what I do now, or what we do now.
Okay,
And then on the capital side, there's something we've thrown in there to.
okay, that's what I'm waiting to see.
Right,
what-
yeah, that discussion, if you got any questions on it, we can
No,
talk about
that's
that.
really, okay, thanks. Anybody else on the bridge? Okay.
Have any questions on the industrial park revenue sheet?
Most of these, John, have already been renegotiated, leases for most of the buildings.
Yeah, most of them are multi-year, yeah. So I think the majority of the income is actual contracts. And then there's some estimates on the remaining space that will likely be rented, or a portion thereof, yeah.
Pretty solid number, John, in your opinion?
I assume so, I mean, but I don't know where all the numbers are derived from, but.
Well, on page 4 for the industrial park revenues in the various buildings, there's nobody that you're aware of that's leaving or anything like that on that schedule?
Yeah, we have a couple that are expiring, one that's leaving in May, smaller area, but I've already worked on with 2 or 3 other potential tenants. So there's, a little bit more income
Okay,
that's already included in here.
thank you.
But the majority of it should be existing contracts that were already on.
So we discussed the port. Railroad is a capped total that we do not exceed. So we actually had a little bit of a learning curve discussion with me, because I put more railroad revenue in there.
I was not here when you did that contract, by the way.
That sounds like a disclaimer.
Oh, yeah, I want to make sure that,
Say, smile at the camera when you say that. I tell you,
I don't think I would have voted for that.
You know what, I mean, to defense of somebody is, if you're losing $500,000 a year, and I can unload it, okay, it's like I'm saving $500,000. I mean, so you have to look at what you're dealing with. I mean, so you still need the rail because of the port, so somebody's operating it for you. They're saving you the opportunity, or the possibilities of losing $500,000 every year. So, I mean, your revenue's not going anywhere, but your cost savings are, and that's really what you got, so.
But at the time, we didn't really have staff that were very knowledgeable in railroad. It just didn't happen.
Well, you stop and think about it. The Penn Central and everything here, everything was being unloaded. I mean, the Northern Rail, everything was going down, and it was like, and I know they were talking about tearing up the short line. Not needed,
Yes, they
not
were.
needed, so I mean,
It's kind of neat in one respect too, just to, make an observation. If you build a building in the industrial park, that thing's gonna have a life of 40, 50 years. And going to cost $2 million in today's dollars. You make that same investment in the railroad, it's there for the next 100 years. I mean, it's just kind of a different, yes, it clearly hurts us when we only get $26,000 coming in, and yet we have to put $142,000 out to be able to finance our bridge projects and things like that. But, it enables the largest wind turbine blade move
Right.
into the port, because we have the railroad there, so it's, anyway, enough on that.
But that's a good point though, Wade. It's a mission of the authority for economic growth and potential here, and that's a responsibility, even though we're losing whatever it wants to be, is we're using it the way that it has possibilities to maintain what you do have. You're not gonna lose, you're at least gonna keep what you got, and that's a big part of all this.
We probably wouldn't have had the company in the industrial, the heavy industrial part.
Oh,
Oh, that's true.
Without the railroad, huh?
So the last one on the revenue side is the border station, page 7. That change in revenue, you'll see from April through September, it's going down from currently $96,000 plus, or $95,000 plus each month, less the $67,000 loan payment that we currently make each month. So as soon as that loan gets paid off, their rental income will drop right off, so.
So by comparison, last year, for example, 1.16 million came rolling through that line. Next year, 360,000.
Yep.
were we in negotiations for that, or a common understanding why it played out that way? I thought we had some discussion on that.
Bad lease agreement put together 15 years ago. I have no, we've had some
That's his disclaimer.
discussion. Absolutely.
That wasn't a railroad committee, was it? That wasn't that railroad.
Maybe it was.
Maybe that railroad. Somebody's gonna say,
Lease agreement.
yeah, and you know what? It's funny you sit here because somebody 15 years from now is gonna say, what were they thinking? What were they thinking of to do, make those type of choices?
Right.
It's all relative to where you are in the moment.
Yeah.
That's what you got. Hopefully it'll be positive. So there's no
Presumably
recapture
we'll
agreement?
we'll be negotiating the new lease agreement in the spring.
That's
Safe
really
to
our
say,
whole
yeah.
budget.
In the spring of this year.
I mean, that really is, think about that. Everything we've done, okay, maintain the progress that we have, and all of a sudden you have a contract negotiated, you said 15 years ago, and now all of a sudden I gotta make up that misgiving of that money from 15 years ago.
What you were paying for a building too
Yeah,
for 15 years.
not really, it was a wash.
It was a wash.
Yes and no. If you plan on budgeting yourself continually for a number, and all of a sudden that number changes,
You have hit an offsetting expense of the cost of the building.
Yeah, on a commercial lease,
Got the
though,
building built.
you know,
Essentially. That was,
on a commercial lease, you'd get all 15 years of the benefits, not cut the benefits off at 30.
Yeah.
30.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
15 years from now, somebody could say the same thing about us.
Where are we off to now?
I'm ready to dive right into the expense side of the ledger if the committee members are prepared as well.
All right, wait a minute, I gotta get my papers all organized again.
First page of the expenses you're gonna see is page 8.
Page 8. Okay, 8. Okay.
So, a little bit of a change in methodology. I've got salary expenses listed as direct, and the direct expenses are coming from your salary page for the toll collectors. They get assigned to the bridge, the airport, which gets assigned to the airport, and then the Port of Ogdensburg, which gets placed in the port. So, this building, the administrative group, includes executive director, director of development marketing, senior administrative assistant, and what had a short life was an IT-compliance officer who has been removed from the budget. The accounting department, which is myself and Faria here next to me.
I think you're going too fast for me. Let's talk about the IT compliance officer, whatever, because I know what our costs are. I know what we can afford, but I also sit here and I know what the IG investigation, all type of things, asked of us to do type of things that we need to do. And to make us become an effective authority, I worry that that expense may hurt us in the long haul of taking it out of the budget. I mean, maybe that's for discussion from you, Wade, or Jim, whatever.
Well,
What we do is, I know
I'm
you
sorry,
need,
go ahead.
go ahead, no, go ahead, I'll let you take the floor.
Well, my opinion's on record on this. We have to have a compliance officer by law. We're required to. It cannot be the chief financial officer by IG decree, for lack of a better term. I don't know how else to say that. That doesn't change the fact that we need one. We looked at this in terms of, could we do a combined IT compliance officer position? And it was in the budget, then it was taken out of the budget. And it was taken out of the budget over my objection, but with my approval, if that makes any sense, because we just don't have the money to do it. Yet we're stuck with this problem that we have to deal with. So I will.
So what are we gonna do? We need a compliance officer, and if we're not funding it, what's our option?
As I have stated on record before, I think it's up to the gentleman down at the end of the table to come up with that. That's why we pay the attorney to solve these type of problems.
Well,
I
let's
thought it
get-
was you first. That was you, Steve.
Like, I do assignment here?
I'd like to
You're in the
have,
wrong
over
seat.
here.
You're in the wrong seat, Steve.
Move over, Ron, I gotta slide over
But there is a very big issue there, because as an authority, we are required by law to have internal controls, to have an internal control officer, yet we do not have one.
see, this bothers me because there's times at this table when it's a state law and we need it and we do it. This is a law and we're not doing it. It's gotta be done.
I respectfully request then that you add it into the budget and we cut elsewhere.
Well, you're gonna have to. If that's the state, now, let me ask you a question. A month down the road, they come in and we don't have a compliance officer, what happens to us then?
We get written up for not having one.
We haven't, when was the last time we had one?
Last time we had one was April of this year, when Fred Morrow retired.
He was a compliance officer?
He was the compliance officer, yes.
Which was, we were told you cannot do that.
I'm sorry, internal control officer. I need to get my
Yeah.
terms correct.
Okay.
Internal control
So
officer.
did we ever ask IG, since they're requiring us to have an internal control, who that should be, based on the staff we already have?
You, as a board, have directed the attorney to do that. There has been no movement on that area. And you've heard me voice my opinion on this several times, that we need to have an internal control officer here.
Is
at the
IG
authority.
aware of who we requested to be the internal control?
You would have to take that up with council on that. I have no
Can
direct
we get
knowledge
some-
on that.
Can we get some information on this for our meeting on Monday from our council?
Certainly. I will ask him again.
And I'd be interested in knowing how many other authorities have a compliance officer.
I know Dank has one, for example. The description for this one over a year ago was modeled on the Dank compliance officer description.
Let me ask you about timing, because this is, what is it, effective April 1st? The budget goes into
April 1st.
April
next
1st,
year,
so
yes.
April 1st. So we're saying by April 1st that person does not exist. So we're actually saying the same thing in December. What if I said let's take 6 months, let's go up to October, what's the 10th month? Can I put that in the budget for October?
Just
Instead of for
it just
80,000,
wouldn't be
whatever it is?
80,000, right?
Sure, I mean, you could prorate it for half year,
All right.
quarter year.
I mean, so
whatever you want.
that's what I'm thinking, because I see other line items here, whatever I look at, and I'm saying, okay, all right, October, I'm just throwing that out, I mean, for discussion. All right, so 6 months of, instead of having the whole what is that, 80, I'll put my glass on again. So for the whole 80,000, I said I'm gonna budget 40, and I'm gonna put that, gives him time to interview, to type of things, whatever, to evaluate the process, and here comes faster than we think. Is in October, we have an officer in place. Does that make sense?
Well, your timing is actually a little off, because we do not have an internal control officer in place right now, as we are required to do in this current budget year.
All right, so there's no
Where
movement.
we are now. Now, that clock ticks through the end of March, and we are 100% out of compliance, because we've had no internal control officer.
All right, so what you're saying that you can't, Jim said yes, you say no, so there's no, I mean, but, wait a minute, you said, and somebody said, nobody. I'm saying,
It's the attorney,
well,
right?
The attorney's been handling this issue with the IG. I have no visibility into what any of those discussions are, because I was not the one that was directed to do it. You
Okay.
directed the
Right,
all
attorney.
right, but wait, let's back up here, let's back up, because here we are in December, we have no compliance officer, and by budget terms, whatever, is not gonna be here until April anyways, because it's not budgeted.
That's right.
Correct.
So it's not budgeted. So now all of a sudden you say, okay, so why wouldn't I say October? I can't afford the whole one for the whole year, but I'll start the process halfway through. So you're saying no?
There is
to the lawyer?
already an existing issue where you do not have a compliance where you do
Right.
not have an internal control officer on staff now. That becomes an audit finding as of
Right.
April 1,
But
2018.
But you just gave me a budget that had no one there at all. You see? You're not giving me, so I know what you're saying. You're saying, no, you can't have it, because I can't afford it. But then on the other side, on the other side of your mouth, you're saying, we're not in compliance for what we need to have. I mean, and so we have to decide how we're gonna finance this and put it back in here.
Well, I think that's an accurate statement, because it comes down to, what do you as a board want to do? Because we have what we're required to do, we have what the law provides, and we have what the IG recommends.
All right, let me go back to my original comment. If we as a board said, okay, in October, we'll have a compliance officer on staff, what does that mean to the process?
You're too late. You already have, you'll have a finding from this current fiscal year that we're in right now. That will show up in the audit that is presented
Okay.
in June of 2018. And then you will be out of compliance further through October of 2018.
Okay, so if I looked at this sheet, and I didn't say anything to you whatsoever, and I let this go through as a board, I'll say, okay, we're all subject to what? A flaw, right? We didn't do what we were supposed to do? Because we should put it in, you're telling me we should put it in.
Yes,
But you didn't,
absolutely.
but you told me not, you didn't put it in.
Correct.
You see where I'm coming from? I'm going, you're saying, all right.
Mr. Chairman, you're not going to hang this one on me.
No,
You as the
no,
board directed
stop it.
council to get an answer
No,
on this.
I'm not,
And council has not
I heard
come
what
forth.
I
May I
heard.
please finish, sir?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna interrupt you too anyway.
I appreciate that, I respect that. You as a board directed council to get an answer on this. Where is that answer from council?
Okay.
That's the question.
All right.
I'm not the lawyer. I can see the law, I can read the law, and I know that the internal control officer is needed.
I understand that, Wade, and I'm not here to argue with it because I know how close we work together to do things the right way, whatever it want to be. But I'm saying to you is, in this process, whatever, I don't see a recommendation number on there. And if you're telling me you want that number in there, and we need that number in there, our job is to follow that up and put it in there. If that's where we need to go, that's where we gotta go. And you're gonna figure out how you're gonna pay for this.
In the absence of a council recommendation, I recommend that we put the $80,000 in there,
Thank you very
because we
much.
need to have one.
Okay, there it is. Now,
But it's not that simple. That requires a motion and a second from this committee to get it in there.
absolutely, then we'll talk about that right now. I mean, And we may have to come back and entertain that, okay, because we have other position cuts here, movements, whatever we need to discuss. And, use the best logic. Give it to me, guys.
Well, I want to hear from council. You're
That's what
absolutely
I-
right. We
you know.
directed council, he hasn't come back.
When's the last time we talked to him about that?
You've directed counsel on that 4 months ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, at least.
okay, so we need,
And it's been mentioned in the executive session
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
as
so,
well.
all right, so we need some advice, okay, then we're going forward, okay.
Because I'm not ready to
Say yes
put
or
that
no.
back in the budget until I hear from council.
I agree with you 100%. You're with it.
Yep. That's why I asked for information for our
Yeah.
meeting on.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
All right, so let's, okay, that was, you want to move down?
Absolutely.
The accounting office is now at full staffing levels. The numbers compare reasonably favorably, comparably to the prior year's budget.
Okay.
Maintenance group is pretty much intact.
So there's no, for Wade, then that, my the building superintendent, or that construction position's gone out of there?
That's correct.
Terry's position,
Yes.
okay.
Yep, that's an unfilled position in the budget.
But it's not part of that, though. I mean, there's nothing in there, right? I'm not looking at it, like a blank for his spot, then there's no placeholder for it.
Correct.
Okay.
So you're actually losing one staff?
Well, we've been working around that for that, but, with the way things are, we're getting by. But there is Terry Bunn was my kind of building superintendent, and he left a year ago, and we haven't filled it.
But you're getting by.
So far, yep.
Do any retirements come up, Steve?
What's that?
Any retirements in the next couple of years?
Probably, I think, the way, maybe age-wise, a couple people in 3 years, maybe,
2 or 3
3 to 5 years, there
Okay.
should be a number of people. And then others, I mean, they're younger, but they've met they're over the 55, and I haven't heard any discussion there, but at any time, they could decide to go elsewhere or do something.
Okay.
Okay, next category is the toll collector. They all get directly assigned through the bridge. There's 5 full-time individuals in there. They're now fully staffed. So what that has prompted is a relatively moderate reduction in part-time and relief and temporary help with the 5 full-timers there, and reductions in the overtime need in that area. So some of that's projection, some of it's actual. So that's why you're seeing those numbers. Airport, we had wanted to add 3 FTEs to the airport operations specialists, and due to budget cutting, we cut it back to 1. That may be an important enough line item to consider adding that back in. Port of Ogdensburg is pretty
Wait,
straightforward.
don't go on yet. I was waiting for you to say something, Doug, before I did.
Oh, so you're saying that we wanted 3 operations specialists and we're only putting 1 in?
Correct.
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
in committee,
We can add more.
No, I'm just,
It's,
because we're gonna sit here 2 months down the road. This gentleman's gonna tell us he needs more help, which we know,
mhm.
all right? And we can't give it to him.
What is the position in airport specialist?
An airport operations specialist is a grade 9 position, CSEA union position. There are 2 ways that function is covered. That function could be covered by a grade 9 specialist or by Volvo with training. So we have put the grade 9 specialist operations maintenance specialists out twice through the contractual process, through internal postings and then external. Both times have had no internal interest. External, I think we have 6, was it 6 resumes, Ron? 4, 6?
I have 13 right now.
13? External. But those are all external folks.
Well, okay,
I
I
got that.
think we need the second one. That's just my,
I thought we needed all three,
well, that's what we were looking at, weren't we? But, and,
right? Don't you?
Oh, Ron said absolutely, bring me
Well,
five.
We do, functionally we do.
well, we talked about it in committee, 2 months ago?
Correct.
And I don't know how you would operate with that staffing that's in that budget right now.
It comes down to, there's a dichotomy going on here because it's what you need to operate versus what you can afford. And what you're seeing here is the what you can afford logic applied. So,
Well, there's a little bit more gray area into that. I think what we safely need to operate is more than what we're showing here. I understand it's.
then I would suggest we add a
I
position
know,
and cut elsewhere.
I got a thought here. I mean, I just kind of looked here, and I'm looking at you, Steve, and your staff of the maintenance people, and how they fit into the airport operations, whatever. And I look at, and help me with this, Ron, you too, Steve. When we were in inclement weather in November, December, January, February, March, and maybe a little bit, maybe April if we get a freak storm, whatever. What is the pressures of those months versus the fair weather months where, you know, I can deal with moisture on the runway, you don't have to deal with snow and everything. What does that mean to the operation for those 4 months or 5 months to your staff helping Ron versus adding those other 2 people in?
It's stressful on my guys in that we have to cover the ARF truck with 2 people on every flight, and not on the weekends. And then for plowing, you need at least 3 people just to do the basics, and then you probably need so out of my 7 or 8 guys, which when you have a weather event, only 2 of them are here, just keeping the road open to the bridge. They're not plowing parking lots in the industrial park or the border station or anything like that, because some of that, you know, especially on the weekends, you can put that off because people aren't active there and you can get to them anytime. But what that does is it puts off work after the snow event. Then you're like this week, we're just straight out until like today. Thank God the weather. But it's, you know, the most important thing is for Ron. And other than the road to the bridge and the runway, that's a safety issue, and we just have to put all hands to making that happen. And if, you know, snow, a certain kind of snow is not bad with what we've got, but there's other things when you throw ice or rain and things like that into it. And to answer your question, from end of November through end of March, it'll be like that.
What is, like a plane is coming in, what would the priority be in the weather event and how your staff be used now versus if we had other extra people?
Oh, well, if you had dedicated people, you
No,
could-
but I'm just saying, we just had a weather event, the plane's coming in, we cleared the runway. How does that system work for you? I mean, where do our people go first? I mean, we need the planes coming in.
yeah,
What-
they'll be out at the runway.
Okay,
I mean, Ron will say, and I've got a little experience with that, but you know, he's been at bigger places and understands it much better than I do. But the thing is, you know, at 2 a.m. in the morning, you know, we don't have dedicated people out there. So you got people that also have responsibilities normally that have to go out there at 2 o'clock, and you just can't run them until 4 in the afternoon.
okay, so then now the question comes, now it's making sense. So if I've got 2 operational specialists who are dedicated to the airport, and they have to be there for 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't have to pull all my staff from your maintenance staff.
No, it would let, but we could still support them, but that's a fair statement.
So they're, okay, I mean, so,
And Ron, I mean, add your opinion, I mean, I might be speaking over
well,
you.
we had a meeting the other day, I mean, not to,
Yeah.
not to inject that here. I understand the pressures of, of this whole operation, and Mr. Burns and I and everybody else in this whole room here, I believe safety is 101 here, and there's no question about it, but I always worry about fatigue. And when you have emotional, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, guess what happens? Mistakes.
Right.
Mistakes. And I can't jeopardize mistakes. And I don't think anybody in the room would say the same thing. You can't do it, whatever. Now, that being said, we're all in agreement of that. One or two people, all right, if we had two, now the question is, now here's the question is, and okay, and Mr. Davis and I, which kind of butt heads a little bit once in a bit, but not too often, but we all agree that, how are we gonna pay for it? How are we gonna put this? How are we gonna do this? And I go, Mr. Smith here, okay? And if we throw 80 and we throw another $150,000 into this budget, now we're tight. We're choking ourselves off. No, the person before you would say, yeah, we can do this, okay, and then we got ourselves in trouble with it, okay? We can't do that. I mean, you gotta tell us exactly where we're at and how we're gonna do this. Because, you know what, if some people have to work a little extra, that's what it is. Oh, what does that mean to you, Jim?
Well, I believe that means, if you look at that $17,000 of overtime, that's not an overwhelmingly large number.
That goes away.
And it doesn't probably go away entirely, but a lot of it can go away.
Okay.
So that can be offset to a small degree. So this operations specialist is an add-on to the expense of the budget, so.
Okay.
So let's kind of put some numbers with that. So if we're talking about $135,000 employee, when you put the benefits on there, you're at a $50,000 bill, round numbers. So now you've taken the airport from absorbing $681,000 in cash, you're now north of $700,000.
What do we do?
So
I've asked that question a million times, and I still haven't got a good answer. What do we do?
there are some things that we need to do regardless of how much money we make or don't make. And safety at the airport is one of those things. However, we add that cost in there, it's gotta come out of somewhere. I hate to say it, it all boils down to dollars. We put that in there,
All right.
and then, it's gotta come out of somewhere.
All right, let's go back to my last compliance officer logic, whatever. This budget doesn't go into place until April 1st. So you're gonna get your two guys in April 1st. Well, that's past the season that we're out of the inclement weather season, we're into a different plan of attack. So if I put two guys into this budget now, and they start in April, I really don't need two guys like I do in November, correct?
No, you still do, because with the duties that they have are wildlife and things like that.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just saying,
And
I'm talking about
he can't
the
be out
pressure.
there 7 days a week. He's gotta have somebody,
I thought we authorized hiring additional people in this year's budget.
We did, and that's, there's one position of airport operations specialist was authorized as last year's budget under non-revenue generating positions. Now, there was
Right,
a
but we
decision
haven't-
made to not hire or not pursue that based on based on the financial picture from about a little over a year ago.
But
There
between
were
that
several
time-
things put on hold. At the same time, the administrative assistants were put on hold, IT compliance officer was put on hold, and the airport operations specialist were put on hold all at the same time.
So if you're following, like you said, good point is, we should probably put some person on right now then. we're into that season. Am I right? At least,
That's my
at least
Correct,
one.
and that's why we have the 13 resumes to start the reviews and things, but it's
Okay.
not, it's
All
not
right.
gonna be an instantaneous process.
No, no, but we had authorized that a month ago, Doug, or more?
Correct. And we've complied with the requirements of
Right,
the
we
union
knew it was gonna take
contract.
a while, but,
You know, if everything goes extremely well from
Which
the
it
day you
hasn't.
post something.
right, it hasn't
with the
gone.
No, actually it has. It's gone really well. The, you know, it takes about 3 months to get somebody on board.
So if we hire that additional operations specialist out there, we'll have two. Right? So if we look at this budget, we're gonna get rid of one in April. So we're gonna
Yes.
hire somebody in January and get rid of them in April.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's not.
Well,
the
if you're
case.
only funding one position,
You funded one, you didn't do it, didn't fill it. So now you're saying you're taking that away, right?
yeah.
You didn't really
Right.
lose anybody. You
Right.
just, the funding.
But we will, if we hire them in January, we'll lose them in April.
You know,
Well,
Because you have,
yeah, it
One
depends
out
on how
there.
you look at it, because you've got a vacancy out there. There was one airport operations specialist out there. That airport operations specialist,
okay,
for other reasons, is no
Yes.
longer there.
yes.
Um,
So this is actually a fill, it's not an additional.
Correct. That is, if you want to look at it from that way, it's replace what you have.
So you're only
It's-
gonna have,
There's no additional
you
there.
only have one,
Correct.
okay. I still think we need to,
you know, one of the things that kind of throws me a little bit is Volo. And where Volo fits into our operations and where we're gonna go. And of course, Ron, we had a discussion yesterday exactly with Volo and the type of things that they wanna do but don't wanna do. And so I think we're kind of lost with them at this point in time. But to me is, maybe in my decision-making process, I shouldn't include them in my thought processes whatsoever. I should ask what Ron's gonna do with the people that we have. They do their operation the way we hired them to do over there, and then we work through it. I mean, that's my feeling. I mean, I know Wade's got some good ideas about, you know, how to change our staffing a little bit with other people that we have, and I'm not sure exactly how that's gonna play out, but in this budget process, I guess I probably don't know what to do or what not to do. You know, I mean, they're in, they're out, they're over and back, whatever, but I know we need help. I know Ron needs help out there. He needs help out there.
If the goal is to expand your capability, then we should add the operations specialist there, a second one, in addition to what's already here.
actually, I would make that motion, Mr.
I'd second.
Finance Committee Chair.
Okay,
I'd
so,
second that.
To add in the budget,
Another airport.
another airport operations specialist.
one.
Add 35-1, is
They
that?
got two now.
Okay, one isn't filled, right, so
Right.
we're asking for two people
Yes.
to be with Ron.
Two operations
They
specialists.
got one.
Right, so what I'm saying, we don't have anybody, but we're saying,
Well-
okay, but it's budget, so,
Right, there is
We're
one,
adding one
there is
to-
one in the budget right now, one in 2017, 2018 budget. So for 2018, 2019, which is what we're looking at, I'm making a motion to add another one.
So when all is said and done, there's a total of 2 airport operations specialists
Yes.
out there come April 1st,
Yes,
2018.
yes.
Yes.
okay.
Now, I see you're doing away with the marketing. Well, who's gonna pick up the marketing end of this?
When
Wait
we're,
a minute. Motion was made and second, we gonna
We
vote
already
on
did
that?
that.
Did we vote? If you did, you lost me.
Okay,
How much was
well, we made
taken?
the motion, okay, all in favor?
Oh, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
all right,
I thought-
okay,
So we just
all right, thank you.
now, as you